Happy Wednesday, UnWoke Nation. I'd like to welcome you to episode 116 of the UnWoke Show, where free speech is welcome, all subjects are on the table, and your boys Rich and Tim bring you the latest and greatest information for your entertainment, baby. I'm your co-host Rich, along with my other co-host here. How you doing, Timmy?
Oh, great, Rich, man. Guys, it's glad to be back. And it's a 4th of July week, man.
Yeah.
So,
yes, it is.
But guys, we're going to do a little housekeeping for you real fast. If you guys are just tuning in or you want to tell your friends about us, there's multiple ways. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, Boomplay, Good Pods. Guys, we're on all the major podcasting platforms. Tune in. Check us out. You can also reach us directly at feedback@unwoketheshow.com. Again, that is feedback@unwoketheshow.com. And tonight, man, we're going to talk about a topic that kind of touches on the archives a little bit of the UnWoke Show. So back in season 1, we initially started talking about trans athletes and how it was destroying women's sports. And then we talked about the fairness debate that gets unpacked. Well, as you know, Trump being elected president has made it one of his mantras to talk about or get rid of DEI and making sure that transgender people in women's sports, basically trying to eliminate that. Rich and I have talked at length about trans individuals in women's sports, transgender men in women's sports, starting from just a biological perspective. When you look at the physiology of a trans male versus a female, and there have been numerous stories out there that have shown the number of women that have, they essentially were the tops in their sport, and then these trans athletes come along and they're no longer the tops in their sports. And I think the most famous one, famous or notorious, depending on how you look at it, is I believe it is Aaliyah Thompson, the transgender swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania. So as you know, Trump has done everything to, like I said, eliminate transgender athletes in sports, and as well as even going so far as eliminating funding for our colleges and institutions. And so it was announced earlier this week, I do believe, earlier this week, in fact yesterday, that the University of Pennsylvania has resolved violations a Department of Education civil rights investigation found involving transgender athletes competing in women's sports. The school and Trump administration announced Tuesday their agreement requires the university to follow Title IX as interpreted by the Department of Education and adopt Trump's executive order defining sex as biological, the department said. The school will no longer allow transgender women in female sports and will provide sex-based locker rooms, the university said. Under the agreement, the university will also restore individual Division I swimming records, titles, or similar recognitions to female athletes, and send a personalized letter of apology to each impacted female, according to the education department. I think this is a very interesting turn of events for the University of Pennsylvania. As you know, Riley Gaines has been a huge proponent of keeping transgender men out of women's sports. Riley Gaines got into it with Simone Biles after Simone posted her little rant about transgender athletes, and Simone pretty much got roasted by her for her comments, and she subsequently went and deleted her Twitter account. But this gets back to the fundamentals of men playing men's sports, women playing women's sports. Right? That on a very fundamental level of, like I said, men competing in men's sports, women competing in women's sports, and the hard work that women put in and the accomplishments that they achieve, only to have, again, this Leah Thompson, who, if you didn't know, she was ranked 200 and I believe 60 something in Division I men's swimming. But as soon as she declared that she was transgender and started competing in women's sport, she became the number one swimmer in U.S. women's sports. I had commented in our fourth episode from season 1 about how Bruce Jenner, I'm drawing a blank on what he ultimately became. He transitioned to full-on woman, and even he was quoted as saying men should play men's sports, women should stick to women's sports. And at the time, to have a famous person who is fully who's fully turned to being a woman, Jenner is the first individual, a famous individual, we should say, that has said, hey, no, I'm advocating on behalf of women, not trans. Right? I would have thought that would have been enough for the trans community to say, hey, wait, we've got this really famous person, the first really to come out and say that, they're full-on female now to be that. But no, we were seeing all over the country, and we can even go back to the previous Olympics in women's boxing, where the Italian boxer, female boxer, was going up against a transgender female boxer, and the female Italian boxer, she ended up saying, listen, I can't compete. And again, it got back down to just the physiology of a transgender male. I mean, it's a no-brainer when you put a male next to a female. And again, this isn't saying that women are weak or anything, but if you just look at the physical makeup of a male against a female, there's a massive difference from a physiology perspective. And then you take that and say, okay, now I'm trans and I'm going to start competing. It becomes what I would say self-defeating, if you will, for women in women's sports. Because what's the point of a female competing in a female sport such as softball or field hockey or track and field or basketball or something? To compete only to be overshadowed by the trans athlete, or say you're in track and field, to lose to a trans athlete, and yet you're the top athlete in, say, track and field, for example, and there's or swimming, for example, right? In the case of what we're talking about now with Leah Thomas and University of Pennsylvania, but this is more, the story is more about really the University of Pennsylvania, and you could say even Donald Trump, withholding funding, and the university taking an about face and upholding the values and traditions of women's sports, and how hard these athletes compete to, and this is at an NCAA level, so this isn't something that you can just say okay to and say, you know what, I we have to acknowledge it. You lost, and if I were a woman competing in, say, swimming today at a collegiate level, and I have to compete against a transgender male, I honestly think I would have serious reservations about that, because of I had to, I was going to have to compete in the high likelihood, just again, based on a physiological level, that the chances that I would lose, right? I mean, imagine yourself being put in that position. Some probably would compete. I don't think I would do it. It's tough. I say that now. Well beyond my collegiate years, but still, it's I feel for these women and stuff today that have to deal with that, and I think this is an important step that the University of Pennsylvania is taking. Plus, I mean, there is a monetary aspect to this as well, right? So, the Trump administration did previously suspend $175 million in federal contracts awarded to the University of Pennsylvania, citing the participation of transgender athlete Leah Thomas on a women's swimming team during the 2021-2022 swim season. Thomas became, the first openly transgender athlete to win an NCAA 1 Division National Championship while competing for the Ivy League school. The fact that Trump withheld those funds, University of Pennsylvania does an about face. They're going to abide by the rules of Title IX, and then all of a sudden, the university is going to get its money back. Did that have something to do with Penn's about face? You better believe it.
Yeah, I would agree, guys. And I apologize, I had a quick family emergency, but I want to be back, talk with you guys. So I appreciate your patience and all. No, Tim, I actually agree with you on that. And when the story broke out yesterday, that's exactly what I thought. I thought it was just okay, them just trying to do the right thing. But it turns out that once it was found out where there was like this endowment in federal funding that was coming from the government. And also, it sounds like that was more of the thing they were really willing to do. In other words, if Trump didn't say anything at all, or any president didn't say anything at all, they would just have to like, okay, oh, well, because if you remember anything about the case or got to hear some of the people, which to this day, and also we still do not know who are the other people who are on the UPenn's female team. They were told when they said about their complaints of being in the locker room and how he's still dressing. It's like, he's dressing with them. It's like, he's dressing with them. And, they said, obviously, he's got his penis out and all this other stuff. And they basically sent out an email saying like, look, you have to comply. So this, what did they say? I think they said that this is a non-discussion. The way I understood from that it was a non-discussion. And so, I think that just adds more to what you're saying, your conclusion about. It's like, are you doing this because it's the right thing to do to protect your female athletes? Or are you doing this and all because you saw what happened with Harvard, you saw what happened with Columbia.
Well, Northwestern. Northwestern as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that those universities were necessarily tied to, I don't think they were having the trans issue. I think it was more about protests and these encampments and stuff.
It's Chicago.
Right. But it's the University of Pennsylvania, obviously, again, with Leah Thompson,
Mm-hmm.
that I think that's where, Trump's stance, men are men, women are women.
Right.
And so I think on a certain level, he's holding the university accountable to Title IX, which makes a lot of sense.
Right. And remember, too, Donald Trump is also a UPenn alum.
Right.
All right. So he was a former student, Wharton School of Business.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of that, for part of this discussion, I was approaching it from the physiological perspective.
Okay.
Right. Bruce Jenner, who became what?
Kylie
Jenner.
Yes.
Right? He was the first to, I think he was either on CNN or on Fox, where he said, no, transgender men should not compete in women's sports.
And I think he said that when he was thinking about the possibility of actually running for governor of California.
Right. And that's the first openly famous trans. So you would have thought that would have carried some weight along the trans community.
Right.
And no. I mean, we were seeing, I talked about Riley Gaines, and how she's become an openly an activist for same-sex sports.
Right.
From a female perspective. I talked about, Simone Biles had chimed in and then she had caught hell and had deleted her Twitter and stuff, right? But whether it's in women's field hockey, whether it was track and field, you name it, all these women were losing essentially to biological men. And then I even talked about that Italian female boxer.
Oh, yes. We did a show on that.
Yeah.
Right.
From the Olympics, or from the previous Olympics in Paris. And how she's like, listen, I can't do this.
Yeah, she made it to that second round and I think in the recent story, the guy who actually ended up winning that division that she was in, I think he was officially banned for the 2028 Olympics that is now coming up in Los Angeles.
Well, I mean, that would make sense.
It would make sense, and that's the thing. It's like you would hope that these schools, these colleges, universities, and even the high schools, or just school systems in general, will sit there and just kind of come together and say, like, look, I don't care what you nip, tuck, slice, or whatever the case may be. All right, you can give yourself 1,000 shots and like that. In the end, scientifically, it's like they will always have, no matter how much you try to diminish their testosterone, they will all have one of two things. Number one, they're going to have to deal with the fact that it's like that person is always going to have more testosterone. It just is, okay? Number two, we're just dealing about anatomy. Men have naturally larger muscle fibers, larger muscles and stuff like that. Therefore, they can generate more power, explosion, regardless of what the sport is. There's nothing you can do about this. All this bull crap about trying to say, oh, he's just a girl like the rest of them. Like, no, he's not. The man was 256 in the entire country.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
under men's.
Yeah, under men's. That's it. He went from being 256 to number one, like that. So it's like, how do you sit there and tell somebody like Riley Gaines, like, wait a minute, this is obviously a guy, and they should be able to give the national championship to the girl, which isn't her.
Right.
It's like, it isn't her. It's like it's another girl who actually won it, and also only for the NCAA at that time to sit and say, well, wait, why are you not giving me an award? Oh, it's for optics. And that was kind of part of the story.
Well, but it was also part of the whole DEI.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody wants to go with the whole libtard agenda and all that other bull crap.
Yep.
And also, but, for me, once we did a little digging about it, it's like, you come out of the story first like, oh, Penn's trying to do the right thing, saying like, hey, you know what, ladies, we apologize. We shouldn't have done something like that. But then it comes out later, it's like, oh, well, basically you guys have 175 million reasons why you're doing that. That's kind of disingenuous. That's just me. So
what was the old adage? Money talks, bullshit walks.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. And it's go ahead.
Northwestern cut a deal with Trump. I know a couple of the other Ivy League schools cut a deal with Columbia. I think they cut a deal with Trump. The Harvard is still despite it, is pushing back on Trump.
Right.
But I think a lot of this story is about the university wanting its money.
Of course.
Right. There's no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to think on a certain level it's doing the right thing as well, too.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. It's the whole purpose of being able to say, we're going to do our best to make sure that we are protecting the safety and the environment for our students.
Right.
This is what we're going to do. Columbia didn't show that. Of course, it's a different story and also all the protests and all that other stuff. And also, but in this particular case, it's like, okay, we literally had, I think, what was it, Boise State or where said that they had, they decided to forfeit. This is the Boise State volleyball team, I think, if I stand correct. They decided to not play San Jose State's volleyball team in their conference tournament because they happen to have a trans athlete on the team. I was like, we're not doing this. And, and I remember the last time we had this, and I think you were right. I think it was from episode 4 when we talked. And I'm like, I said the number one thing where the female athletes from high school all the way up to college, right, you have to do just one thing, nothing. Now, it doesn't mean the word when I say nothing as in, okay, just let this go by. What I'm saying is that if you sit there and decide, like two girls did, I think about 2 weeks ago, no, they were doing for their track and also, and they decided they're not going to go up on the podium. It's like, no, this guy sat there, obliterated us because you let him go from John to Jasmine, and you want us to sit there and participate? And that's like, no, we're not doing that. And what did those judges say? Well, if you're not going to be involved in this work, then you just need to go off to the side. It's like, well, I'm sorry, then that's what you do. It's like, you do nothing. If you're at the starting block, I don't care if you're doing it for swimming or track or whatever the case may be, don't jump, don't start. Period. And I think what's now come where, and of course, including what the president did, I think in his first week, where it's like, all the girls are all across the country. So I'm saying, like, it's like, hey, you know what? We're going to stop this nationally and also because women fought too much for Title IX, right, to be able to sit there and have this agenda coming down to sit there and say, well, there's 27 genders, all this other stuff, and be able to put up with that.
Well, I go back to, I think, a comment I made in that first season, episode 4, is what is it with all these men wanting to become women and play women's sports, but you don't see women wanting to become men?
No.
To go play men's sports.
No, you want to know why? No, because they know they would get their butts kicked.
Right.
Okay? So, you always see these new things where there was for years, I don't know, especially when it started to really become a hot topic and like that. It's like, look, women's sports is not an alternative for mediocre male athletes. Yeah. Okay? It's like, you don't like it, get better.
Exactly. That's
really what it comes down to. And also now Leah Thomas like that because I think he was trying to go for the Olympics and I guess the Olympic Committee says like, Wayne, you're not doing this.
Yeah, I'm not having it.
Nah, it's not having it. So
UnWoke Nation, we're going to leave it right there with you guys. We'd love to get your feedback on this story. You can reach us at feedback@unwoketheshow.com. Again, that is feedback@unwoketheshow.com. Rich, a pleasure as always, man. And remember, stay unwoke.
See